us a brief bio. We'll ask you about some of the issues. We encourage you to respond to each other if you disagree with something that an opponent says. Please feel free to follow up on it. We'll have plenty of time for questions. We don't guarantee everybody gets equal time to answer, but we will try and cover a lot of ground fairly quickly. So why don't we start, Brian, ready? Start with you, Senator Manning, if you'll just tell us a little bit about yourself, the office you're running for, mention your, because this will be filmed and people watching who may not know you, tell us your party affiliation, and you'll go from there.
Okay. My name is James Ivory Manning Jr. I am the Senator from Senate District 7 and the current Senate President Pro Tem. Second term is Pro Tem. First time I ran for Pro Tem, I was elected to by the body on a bipartisan vote. Last year when I ran for re-election, I was elected unanimously. So even my Democratic and Republican colleagues feel that I am the one with the highest degree of integrity and trust. They know that I'm willing to work with everybody to solve problems that impact all Oregonians. I've been in the state Senate for 8 years. The first time I was appointed in 2016. The first time I ran in 2018, I was elected, I was endorsed by all the major parties, Democrat, Independent, Working Family, and Republican Party. I won that race by 98.8% of the vote. So even my constituents in my area have seen me and they like the work that I do. A little background about education. We're talking about education. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Leadership. I hold a MA in Organizational Leadership. I hold a BA in Criminal Justice Administration and a AA in Law Enforcement. Currently a candidate for a doctoral candidate at Grand Canyon University. My previous government experience, well, a lot of that. I served 24 years active duty United States Army. I am a former police officer.
Where were you a police officer?
I was a police officer in a small town in Missouri called Sedalia, Missouri.
For how long?
I was there, I graduated with my BA, I think it's 75. I was there for about 9 months before I was recruited and got hired by Frisco Railroad as a railroad special agent. So I worked as a railroad special agent for 3 years, got my private investigator's license. And then I'm looking at a commercial saying, be all that you can be. People are jumping out of helicopters and stuff, and I thought that it was a great time for me to join the military and do my civic duty. My intentions were to go into the Army for 3 years. 24 years and 3 months later, I retired. At my retirement, I accepted a position in Eugene, a Weyerhaeuser company, which is how I got to Eugene. Since I've been in Eugene, I have worked on nonprofit boards. Pearl Buck Center comes to mind first. Sponsors, was on one of their boards. I started a foundation called the Oregon Black Education Foundation, where we provide scholarships to low-income and underrepresented students. Since 2013, we've been doing that. I did volunteer mediation for Lane County Circuit Court for 3 years. I mediated over 300 sessions. Only 5 had to go before a judge to make a decision. I was on the Eugene Police Commission, where I was the one that helped crafted the first body-worn cam here in the state. So it's working very well there. I was appointed by Governor Kitzhaber to the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs and reappointed by Governor Brown, serving 2 terms. I chaired those commissions for 3 consecutive years until my appointment to the Oregon State Senate.
Whose Senate seat were you appointed to, or who's the precinct?
Chris Edwards was one that
he resigned.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So since I have been in the legislation for 7, now 8 years, I have co-sponsored over 125 bills that are all signed into law. Bills that protect workers' rights, bills that protect reproductive freedoms, bills that help us with apprenticeship programs. My intention was to open the doors and expand job opportunities to minority and women-owned businesses here. I think those businesses and stuff are underrepresented. I think that it's kind of hard for them to actually get a fair shake. So I've been working in that area, but one of the things that I'm really proud of, and I worked on for 7 years, I have finally got a universal health care bill done. That universal health care bill, when people were saying that it couldn't move, I got it done. Now I'm at a place now where there's a universal health care governance board. That board is designed to look at the work that a task force, Senate Bill 770 that I put together, with a comprehensive report about this thick, came back. And it will be the blueprint for the universal healthcare system for the state of Oregon. I guess to me now, since the board has been appointed and they have an executive director, that board will, within 2 to 5 years, Oregon will be the first state in the nation with a universal healthcare single-payer system. And the reason for that is that we have people that can't afford to have insurance. They utilize our ERs, our emergency rooms, as their primary care provider. And we have people that make $1 too much that cannot afford health care. So that's really important. How do we make sure that everybody has equitable health care? The other thing about that is that it is portable. Wherever they go, that insurance coverage will go with them here in the state of Oregon. The other thing that I've been working on is the expanding opportunity to the ballot. I did a bill to have ballot postage paid return envelopes. The bill it passed, it's in effect, and now Oregon is the highest participation rate in the nation with voter turnout because of that. My thinking to bring that forward was that we have people in rural and frontier counties that don't have access to a drop box. We have people that are physically disabled to get out and cast their vote. They are legally entitled to actually be a part of our democracy. This has helped motivate everyone else to get involved and cast their ballot. By the way, when you hear the thing about fraud or ballots being illegal, we have one of the most robust signatory checking systems anywhere else, and vote by mail always leaves a paper trail.
Okay, let me stop you there and let your opponents have a chance to introduce themselves. Dave, go ahead, please.
I'm Dave Staver. I'm a Portland resident. I went to Roosevelt High School in North Portland, and I have considerable education and employment experience, but what I'd like to start with is my education and experience in the environmental area that I'm running for Secretary of State on. I have invented 5 inventions to solve some of our most vexing environmental problems.
But Dave, I don't want to be rude. How do those relate to the work of the Secretary of State, who's in charge of elections, in charge of audits, in charge of the corporations division? Those really don't have much to do with your inventions.
Well, if you look at ORS 184, there's the Secretary of State is also the chair of the Board of Sustainability and Environment. And that's why I'm running, because that's a huge part of the job, particularly now, because we have big environmental problems.
Okay, so you've got 5 inventions. We've heard about some of them before. Can you give us the one that is the most useful, most essential, and we'll hear about that. I'll start with the one I received yesterday, and that is a way to generate electricity from wave power. You may have heard of Oregon State University working on inventions to generate electricity from wave power. They haven't worked.
I've got a new invention with a new,
You say you got it yesterday. Does that mean you had a patent approved yesterday?
yes, well, yeah, it's granted, and they issued the written statement yesterday.
Can you just take a minute and tell the rest of this group a little bit about your work history and what offices you've run for before?
I spent 15 years as a practicing attorney doing general litigation, and I
In
also...
Portland?
Yes,
Solo practitioner, or were you with a firm?
sole practitioner. And I've also worked for some CPA firms as an auditor, and I've also taught accounting and business and law courses at community colleges and Lewis and Clark Law School.
And remind us what offices you've run for before?
I ran for governor in 2016. I ran for governor again when they repeat. That was a short term for Governor Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran again in 2018, and in
In 2022.
in 2022, I ran for governor again.
Gotcha. And again, your interest in this seat is the role, the leadership that you could show on the environmental front? Is that your fundamental interest in running for Secretary of State?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Really looking for this state needs some leadership in the environment. We've got all the scientific experts saying that we're going to come upon an environmental crisis here at some point,
Right.
where it gets too hot, and we haven't got the leadership to get through environmental improvements that can reduce that bad effect that we're looking at.
Okay,
Treasurer Read, please introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm Tobias Read. I am a husband, a father, and I happen to have the honor of serving as state treasurer. I'm an Oregonian by choice. I was born in Montana and raised in Idaho, and came here for college, and have more or less stuck around with a couple of brief exiles. And I was raised by parents who made it clear that I had some obligations to people who'd come before me and invested in me. So always looking for places to make things better. And that's what motivated me to run for the legislature, motivated me to run for treasurer. And I'm really looking forward to taking what I've learned in state treasury to the Secretary of State's office.
What have you learned at the Treasury that is going to be useful if you were to be Secretary of State?
Well, the difference, I think, between being in the legislature and being in the executive office, I learned a lot in the legislature about passing bills and improving budgets, but I also learned that that in a lot of cases that's the start of the work. One really good example of that is the work we did on Oregon Saves. This was one of the last bills I got to work on as a legislator, and then in a matter of continuity, I got to implement it as state treasurer. And I think we have a lot of examples, maybe even a Hall of Fame in Oregon that populated by good intentions that suffered from bad execution. And the Secretary of State's office has an important role to play when it comes to audits. Elections, of course, and I know we'll talk about that at great length. But for me, I'm well enough aware of myself to know that I'm probably not the flashiest guy in any race I've ever been in. Some people even call me Mr. Rogers of Oregon politics, maybe even somebody in this room. And I don't necessarily take that as an insult. I think it's a matter of
favorite TV characters.
I got to meet him as a kid. He was
Really
just
made
like
an
he
impression
was.
on
Yeah, well, right. And so I think that's emblematic of my approach. I'm about trying to get results, about making things better, and I don't think there is any substitute.
I'm going to interrupt you.
That's fine.
Your vast knowledge of the state bureaucracy, right? No.
Well,
you've got more knowledge.
I know some things, yes.
Okay, I mean, Senator Manning might object, But given your vast knowledge, what's the first agency that you're going to want to audit?
Well, I want to make sure that this is a really good question, and I'm not dodging it, but I think that's part of the problem with what audits are right now. They're perceived to be a political agenda, a sense of, I'm going to go after something. So I want an audit plan that is based on a real risk assessment to understand where are the biggest vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
and I think that has to do with, wait.
I'm not going to accept that.
That's fine. Well, let me go further because I got two other points about this. I think part of it is looking at where we spend a lot of money, and another part of it is where is the well-being of real Oregonians at risk.
And you're a
so the
smart
health
guy,
authority,
you've done all that.
So the health authority,
Okay.
the Department of Corrections are two good examples. But I think when we get too specific too early, we run the risk of making the resulting product not credible. And I think that's part of what makes the audits less effective.
So you're saying you think Oregon Health Authority should be audited, but you don't want to really say that?
Well, no, I'll say that.
Because you're worried that people will think that you're on a political agenda rather than...
Well, I don't. I'm confident that something related to the health authority, something related to education, something related to corrections. But I think it's premature to say exactly what. Because look, when you're state treasurer, everybody's brother-in-law has a stock tip. When you're running for Secretary of State, everybody says, you know what you ought to audit? And I think it's inappropriate to say yes to that and no to that. There's got to...
We interrupted you before you were going to tell us what you learned as treasurer. It would take to the Secretary of State's office.
I think what I've learned is what it takes to lead a statewide agency, to make sure that a group of hundreds of people have the resources they need, have the clear understanding of what expectations are in an agency, to make sure that they're held accountable, to be attentive to the details, managing a portfolio of $140 billion, transactions of $380 billion, hundreds of thousands of accounts. These are things that people count on. And the same is true in the Secretary of State's office. We can't get elections wrong. We can't get audits wrong. The Corporation Division has plenty of opportunity to improve as well. So I think the nature of being a leader of a large team, setting a vision, setting a culture, ensuring results, and delivering for Oregonians is different than passing bills and adopting budgets.
Senator Manning, what is the area of the Secretary of State's work that you think is most in need of improvement from the next secretary?
Well, thank you for that question. There are a number of areas. So let me go back to the audit part. During my tenure in the legislature, I get a lot of constituents, many outside of my own district approach me, and they have complaints about minority hiring and women firms being hired through ODOT. So when we're talking about that, I've been hearing it for years.
Meaning that they don't hire? They
don't hire, unfair practices and things like that. We need to clear that up. So I would be looking forward to doing an audit on ODOT. I think it's necessary. Another area that we're talking about is we know that we're in a healthcare crisis. We have hospitals closing. In my district, in Eugene, they closed the hospital down and the urgent care centers, which means that now
the university district.
Yes, in the university district. So people now have to add another 20 to 30 minutes to get some kind of medical care. I want to know what's going on with this. So I want to be in touch and work with OHA. Let's talk about this. Let's get to the root of this because people need to understand what's going on in this healthcare crisis.
But in terms of the function of the agency, what have you observed in your 8 years in the Senate where you say they're screwing up the voters pamphlet, or their audits don't matter because nobody ever follows them, or the corporations division is letting shell companies from out of state set up here with no accountability? What is it that we could expect to be better under your leadership?
I think all of those opportunities, here's my vision moving forward, especially with elections. Now, we know that elections offices around the U.S., people are being threatened. Here in Oregon, I authored and co-authored a bill to provide additional protections for elections workers. That's really important. I think that we needed to put more focus on that, but we have one of the best voting systems in the nation vote by mail, which I am committed to preserving and make sure it goes through and it stays on course. There are elements right now that try to introduce a bill to roll back the clocks and have Oregonians stand in line at a polling place. We're not doing that. That was something that's offered by one of my Republican friends. We're not going to do that. The thing is that I want to expand more access to the ballot. We can improve upon that. I did a bill this past session that will allow college and university students first time upon enrollment in the University of College will automatically be enrolled as voters. We did that with the advent of motor voter registration. We did another one with the enrolling in the Oregon Health Plan. This will expand opportunity to the polling place for young students. I think that we need to get more civic engagements in. We need to have more communications with voters to dispel dis and misinformation about our voter systems. I get a lot of emails and stuff and letters from people saying that our voter system is broke. There's a lot of fraud. We have the lowest reported fraud cases in any state. They're virtually unknown. So those are things, make sure that we're improving upon our education, making sure we're dispelling dis and misinformation. I think those are the things that help kill democracy.
I think Senator Manning has a good point in terms of the gap between the reality of our voting system and people's perceptions. And that's one of the things I've talked to 24, I think maybe 25 of the county clerks around the state, hearing what they are hearing from their constituents. There are different situations in different communities, of course, but that gap between perception and reality is really important. And so those of us who live in this area are lucky enough to have the opportunity to opt into ballot tracks. It's a brand name, of course, but the notion of notifications when ballots are sent, when they're received, when they're accepted has really helped people. And I think there's the confidence that people feel that is. And there's another concept I've been reading about in a California county where they've applied the concept of ride-alongs to ballots. It's hard to imagine how quickly we could scale that, but for those who are skeptical, having a chance to follow the process that a ballot goes through and see the protocols and procedures and controls that are in place, it's pretty durable, and people are able to tell that story and boost the confidence that stands between them and reality.
So same question though for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any direct observations of things
Yes.
that you think the agency could be doing better, should be doing better?
Yeah, one thing in particular is I've talked to business owners and associations around the state. The experience that they have in their registration process is something less than ideal. There's some variations, of course, but we've had really intriguing conversations with a number of them that indicate an opportunity where the Secretary of State and the Corporation Division particularly could be more at least of a single point of contact. So businesses who would rather be working on their business than running around trying to figure out the implications of the latest rule or the newest policy, the Secretary of State having that relationship in terms of registrations could help fill that role and make it easier for businesses to understand what they need to do and get back to running their business.
What's hard about my understanding is that registering a business in Oregon is really easy. What are the complications?
What we've heard from them is just the process and the inconsistency across different kinds of information that's needed across state government, local government, the ability to pay the relevant fees, the same stories that we probably remember from the DMV, whether they take credit cards and checks and they have to print the check or fax things, all of these sorts of things. And I've heard lots of versions of these. I have not verified every detail of it, but the point for me was there's inconsistency and there's perception and there's a feeling that it's hard. It reminds me sometimes of when I encounter people who say Oregon is not business friendly, and I'm inclined to say, well, what does that mean to you? Because people have very different ideas about that. But the point for me, I think, is that there is room to improve the perception, the experience, the idea that businesses, of course, can go anywhere. We want to make it easy for businesses to do the right thing and succeed here in Oregon.
What about the flip side of that? Like, are you concerned at all about our oversight of businesses and corporations, and
Sure.
And in what sense? I mean, in what ways?
Well, I think it's important to know who is a business owner who is involved in a business and making sure that we are as transparent as possible. There's an interesting conversation with somebody about legislation and policies in some other states where it has been made easier to obscure the ownership of a business. That's not something, fortunately, that has been, that policy that I was talking about does not exist in Oregon, but it raises that question of how we strike that balance and make sure that businesses are accessible and following the law.
But it sounds like we already do that in Oregon. So what's in need of improvement there?
Well, I was talking about just the registration and the process.
Sure, but as far as making sure corporations are following, I mean, what do you see as because you talked about what might be difficult about registering a business, but what about the flip side of that, which is making sure businesses are acting in good faith?
I think we should. I have not heard that as a specific issue that's a shortcoming right now, but obviously be open to those improvements, and that might well be something that is deserving of an audit as well.
You're all running to be the chief elections officer of the state of Oregon. Could each of you take a minute and describe to us and our viewers what the Portland City Council's ranked choice voting is going to be like? Could you dumb it down for us? How is it going to work?
Probably not, because I'm pretty interested in how it's all going to play out. I understand the mechanics to a decent degree of having.
What about it do you not understand, or that you're still puzzled?
Well, I'm being a little bit flip when you say how's it going to work. I don't know if it's going to work, because I think it is a big change that people are going to have to adjust to and figure out how are they going to vote amongst the district they live in for candidates, a lot of them, and navigate that. So I was sort of joking, like I don't know what it's going to turn out, but I think it's certainly a good example of of the experiment of trying to make it easier for people to feel like their views are represented. But I'm watching with a lot of interest to see as more and more candidates get in.
So thoughts about expanding that statewide?
Yes, I've had in all those conversations I've had with county clerks, they all say two specific things about ranked choice voting, which of course is going to be on the ballot for all of us statewide. One, they express some version of concern about the implementation, and after a pause, they happily all say, but we'll figure it out. They go on to say that they didn't feel like the process that resulted in this referral accounted for the details of implementation. And this is really boring stuff, but figuring out which provider does one county use versus another about printing the ballot. How is an office that spans multiple counties going to be handled? They like the idea of making people more excited about voting and reflecting their preferences, but getting it done right is going to matter.
One related question, open primary?
I'm nervous. It's interesting that you asked that right after Portland, which I feel like could also be described as doing kind of everything all at once in some ways, ranked choice voting and multi-member districts and all that. Right. So I think the fact that we're going to have ranked choice voting on the ballot in November is a good step to make more people excited about voting. Open primaries might be another really good policy, but I don't want to try to do everything all at once. So let's see how ranked choice voting.
Have you taken a position on open primaries? I mean, that's been something that people have been talking about here for as long as you've been in politics.
Yeah.
Have you ever been?
I don't think I have, because I don't know that it's a panacea. You still got to have voters who are attracted to candidates. I think the situation we're in, as more non-affiliated voters come into our system, many of them through automatic voter registration, and fewer people pick a party, that's untenable. And the under-participation of non-affiliated voters is a real problem. We can't allow that to continue. So ranked choice voting may contribute to a solution. I'd like to see how that plays out and make sure that we implement that really well if it passes, and then we can continue to explore other options.
So let's just quickly, do you have a position on do you understand ranked choice voting?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you have a position on open primary?
I think that the people of Oregon are happy with the voting system that we have at present, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And you're basing their happiness on what index?
That we've had a great deal of participation in the votes that we've had. I think Mr. Manning will also agree with this, that we have one of the highest participation rates in the country, and people seem to be happy with
In a
the
general election.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about primary elections, but okay. Senator Manning, just
Yes.
quickly, ranked choice voting, do you get it, do you support it, and where are you in open primaries?
I'm on the Senate Rules Committee. Ranked choice voting came, remember it was the speaker brought it over, and I explained to the speaker I was concerned about ranked choice voting. I was concerned because the impact that it could have on communities of color, of those people that more very qualified but don't have name rec, how that would eliminate them. So although I had to raise those concerns, and they still are mine, again, you know, if it's not broken, why fix it? But I voted to move it out of the committee. And then when it got to the Senate floor, I voted to move it forward because it's going to be going to the people to make a decision. And whatever the people decide as Secretary of State, that's what I will implement.
Open primary?
I'm looking forward to opportunities to do same-day registration. You know, this will allow people in a window at the last point, if they have a particular party affiliation that they want to vote in, they can register right there before and then participate in those elections. So I think that is a start. It may not be the solution, but at least it's a start, and it'll be an opportunity for those non-affiliated voters to participate in these.
But they'd have to sign up and be a Democrat.
They are Republican.
Right.
Right, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So there are more than 2 years worth of elections complaints sitting in the Secretary of State's office that have not been addressed. The office has come to the legislature a couple times looking for more money. You've given them more money, but there are still 2 years of complaints. So what should we think about that, and is it acceptable?
As Secretary of State, I am a former United States Army Assistant Inspector General. So I've done auditing nationally and internationally. First thing we have to do is, we have to invest in people. I do a sensing session to find out what's going on with the employees, how we can make things better, because oftentimes boots on the ground have the solution only if the leadership will listen. In addition to that, I'm also looking at how do we fix these systems that are the money that's there. Sometimes you have to do an internal audit in order to find out where are the snafus, the things that's not working well. I can do that because I've had a lot of experience in that, and I've even received commendations for the results of my work. More importantly, when you talk about backlogs like that, there is, for me, in my experience, that sensing session is really important because you have to find out, are they being trained? The other piece is that we don't have standardized training that will impact all elections offices in all 36 states. I've already asked for $5 to $10 million for 3 things. One is to enhance security upgrades at all 36 elections division stations around here, provide protection clothing or equipment that they may need. There was a letter that was sent to Oregon and Eugene, and when they got it, they opened it up and it contained a white substance. Well, the good news is that it was non-toxic. The bad news that it's happened, and what is that effect that it has on terrorizing election workers and volunteers? So we have to do that. The other one, in which I think is most critical, is to have standardized standardized training. Because when you have elections officers or elected officials move from one place to the other, and there's no one else to maintain the vision, what do? If you move people in, at least they will have a basic understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the office. That doesn't exist right now. That's part of my vision in order to make sure that we do better by our people. This isn't one about leadership and how we take care of the people. If you take care of the people, they will do the job.
Nigel, the answer to your direct question you ended with, is it acceptable? The answer is no. It is one part getting additional investments and capacity from the legislature, which we had great success with in the investment division, reducing costs and adding efficiency and capacity, but it's also about the follow-through. I'm really proud of what we've done with unclaimed property at Treasury when it came from the Department of State Lands, kind of languishing there. And in 2 years at Treasury, we took the average waiting time for a claim from 13 months to under 5. That's not where we want it to be, but it's a dramatic improvement, not only because of the investments that the legislature has made that we secured, but because of the attention we give and support we give to that division now that it's part of Treasury.
I'm just wondering if any of you think that, given the moment we're living in and the ability of Trump to cast doubt on our elections, and then arguably the perversion of the office that was Shemia Fagan, should the Secretary of State be an elected position, or should it be appointed?
Yes. It should be elected, because as long as the Secretary of State is the auditor, you've got to have the independence to be able to follow where the data and the money goes.
But perception is that it's not independent.
Well, fine. In terms of perception, I mean, in fact, obviously it's
The perception is, look,
right.
Here we have two ambitious politicians, both of one party, happens to be the party in charge, running to be the chief elections officer.
The difference in
The
this...
perception...
Yeah, I hear you. The difference, I think, is one of us has served in statewide elected office, has had to take those unpopular positions and push back against other parts of state government. So that's a record that I'm happy to stand on and be able to say,
I wouldn't
I'm
be
ready to do
personal
it.
about it. I was
That's
just
fine.
pointing sort of conceptually this idea, because it is true in many states, this office is an appointed position.
Some, yeah. I don't know the number, but some, yes.
So, but anyway, you like it the way it is. You also...
It should be elected. The people should be making a decision on who operates and serves in that. The term politician, I'm not. A public servant, I am. I serve at the will of the people, will and pleasure of the people. So I do agree that it must be a elected position, a independent position, but then it has to have strong leadership. It has to have character. It has to have restored. One of the reasons I'm running is to restore the integrity of the office of Secretary of State and preserve vote by mail. Those are really quintessential issues and part of that process. Now, I have ran federal programs, and I ran programs that had people under my charge, which was life or death. So, just to say that, I had a statewide position, I don't think that that's a qualification or anything. I think that my experience is real world, where I also oversee trillions of dollars of equipments and weapon systems, makes me uniquely different in terms of that.
You oversaw what?
Trillions of dollars. I was...
Okay,
Okay,
you're
so-
going to have to explain that one.
Okay, so when I was a diplomat assigned to the Australia, in the embassy there, I conducted sales of multi-million dollars, trillions of dollars of weapon systems. Trillions. When you look at all things conceptually combined, the M1A1 tank sales to the Australian Defense Force, the Apache helicopters that we sold to the Australian New Zealand Defense Force, all of those things add up over time, and you look at all of the numbers. I have gotten accommodations for the way I handle that on a diplomatic level. So I have diplomatic, international, federal experience. If we're going to talk about experience, then I can lay my cards on the table just as well as anyone else.
Okay.
Can I, Sophie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but didn't the current Secretary of State let stand the audit that
Yes.
was tainted by,
Yes. Yes.
by the...
She didn't pull it down off the
Right.
website.
Now,
Yeah.
what would you have done, what would each of you have done in that case?
I think I would likely pull it down. I have not thought about that a lot, but the fact that the process that it went through to get where it was, I think that calls the conclusions into question. It might well justify a recasting of that, a second look, but enough I think around that is in question, that it needs that second look.
Come down.
I think so.
Anyone else?
You're talking about the audit that,
The OLCC audit.
that what?
Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission audit.
Yes, and that's where there
It
was
was
a
tainted because-
$10,000 contract for consulting by the Secretary.
Among other
of State.
things.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about pulling that audit down. And I'd have to examine that audit to see how thorough it was.
Okay. Senator Mann?
You know, again, my experience as a assistant inspector general auditing, one of the rules is that you have to go in as an independent. Well, unfortunately, it seems that the previous secretary had some other underlying connections and stuff. So I think that the audit needs to be redone. I think that it is tainted. You know, I think that the current Secretary of State, she went ahead and she did an audit of the same program. Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't seen the results of that. But yeah, it's that's where you lose the trust of the people when you do things like that. That's when your integrity comes into question.
Can I ask one more? Do you think that we need more clarity around the role of the first spouse? This is coming up now for obvious reasons. I mean, my reading on this is that it's just sort of this nebulous. What should be done here?
I think there is a conversation to be had, and the questions that are being raised here are reasonable ones to ask. I think that there's a process that we should follow through the legislature.
Here's this, if elected.
Yes.
You're married.
Yes.
Would your wife ever serve
No.
in the office?
No.
I mean, she wouldn't want to.
Correct.
She wouldn't want to work with you, but let's assume she did.
You're accurate. You're
No,
exactly
I
right.
know, but let's assume she did.
Yeah.
You would find it untenable.
I would.
You would find it unacceptable.
I would. I can imagine some, I mean, obviously, occasionally she's willing to accompany me to a dinner or those sorts of things.
No, I'm talking
so
about-
symbolic things I think are fine, but I can't
Staff
imagine.
meetings or,
No.
Why not?
I think I certainly benefit from conversations with her and perspective and being able to bounce things off, but I think that is different. It doesn't make sense to me that a person who didn't undergo the same sort of scrutiny or the same application process for a staff position or following the other sorts of qualifications, that's me. That's how I would think about that in the situation I can imagine myself in. But
Do you think it's inappropriate? Would you call it inappropriate that she has a position, or would you?
I'm talking about my wife and my situation right
sure,
now.
but we're also
So-
asking about not just specifically about yours.
Right. So separating my previous answer from this, I think Anthony's point is right, that it's an early indication of how we need to explore that question, and it might well be a deliberate policy question that the legislature, that others want to weigh in, and being proactive about that. I think that's the way to take that on, rather than looking backward, starting something without being diligent and deliberate about it.
If you want to maintain the trust and your integrity, the first thing I do is to consult with the right people. In this case, I would reach out to the Ethics Commission first and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What would that look like? This is only me. I can't say the reason behind what the governor did was right or wrong. I don't know that. I do know that it has caused a lot of backfire. Now, as when my wife was here alive, she passed away almost 3 years ago. She served as my chief of staff in the Senate. I confer with her all the time, and I got to be honest with you, people would stop by to see her and not me, even the governor.
We have that in common.
Yeah, so it's more likable than me. But when you start moving up, you start thinking about other instances and stuff. Why would I wouldn't want to bring in unnecessary attention or attraction for something. We've seen it happen with one of our previous governors and stuff. Unfortunately, things like that happen. But I would do a consultation with Ethics Commission first, make sure that they knew, and then I would consult. We got a team of lawyers. You know, what does that look like? Because you want first, I want to make sure that it is ethically sound and legally responsible before I can do. So these are the kind of things that I do. I do my own processes because I've seen it happen so many other times.
Could you each just really quickly tell us one endorsement that you've received that you're particularly proud of? James, we'll start with you.
You know, I just got this one in, and this is from Katie Imus. She is the widower of the late Secretary of State Bill Bradbury. And Katie said, I am confident that if Bill Bradley was here, he would wholeheartedly endorse James Manning for Secretary of State.
That's a nice one. Surprised you didn't get that wrapped up. Dave, how about you?
We'll talk about
I
widows
don't
and
have
actual
any
secretaries of
endorsements
state.
at this time.
You don't have any?
That's right.
Okay. And who's the endorsement you're most?
I would say the 3 former secretaries of state, the only secretaries of state who have endorsed in the race: Barbara Roberts, Gene Atkins, and Phil Keesley.
No Kate Brown?
She has not decided to be in the
Did you
race.
ask her?
I talked to her about the race, and she sort of cut me off and said, "I'm not going to be in the race."
Oh, okay.
Have we exhausted the questions? I've never been in an interview with all of you, and you just were silent for that long.
You did it.
We're out.
I want to ask about an issue that came up with the elections director that Shamina fired, who was very unhappy about the level of transparency around violations, around late filings, around improper filings and non-filings. So has the Secretary of State's system, the reporting system, ORSTAR, kept up with best practices around the country? And please elaborate on that. Go ahead.
I'll confess that I have not spent a lot of time on the finance sites in other states, but I would be really concerned if we are on par with others, having only one tab and a lot of time waiting for the responsiveness. So I don't think we're probably best practice on that front. The piece for me that is really important here is setting the tone from the top. So if I'm Secretary of State, I'm not going to be endorsing in any race that is an election I would have a role in overseeing, and I would be hiring elections professionals, not people who are partisans. All the rest of the things I think you point out are legitimate, but those are really important points to start with, I think.
Training, making sure that everybody is on the same sheet of music is really important. I think that is a key. What are the expectations? So that everyone understands that this is the process, and more importantly, the accountability portion. I'm the kind of person that I don't just create legislation. It has to be meaningful, and meaningful also include accountability. If people are not willing to abide by the rules and regulations that's in front of them, certainly we're going to have to make some adjustments. I'm not afraid to do that because I've had to be in that position before, in a position where it was about life or death. So that's really important. That issue that you just referenced, it resonated throughout the state. A lot of conversation about it. We'd have to fix that. It's serious because if it happens then, it can happen again. If we don't have expectations and hold people accountable, it'll happen again.
So Anthony asked about a situation where the Secretary of State, Shamina Fagan, clearly influenced or tried to influence an audit. The auditors did the audit. An outside investigator said it ought to be taken down. Current Secretary of State said no. So let's back up to a different question. Should the auditor who did that audit, Kip Memmott, who's been in charge of audits for some years now, should he still have his job?
If the auditor was unbiased, did the audit regardless of outside influence, if there's an auditor that is assigned a task, and if they do it according to the standards, according to the needs, without tainting anything, I think that, and report back, first off, the person responsible for overseeing the audit is the one that is accountable as well.
Well, she lost her job, but he's
Exactly.
still got his.
If his was unbiased and he did a complete thorough, I haven't seen the audit, if it revealed all of the facts and it was done without influence, if he was influenced by it, then, you know, perhaps that's not the area for him because he will compromise his integrity again. In the military, we had a saying, it's called the creed of the non-commissioned officer, and it says that I will not use my position for pleasure or money, and I would not compromise my integrity nor my moral courage. And if an individual is willing to sacrifice their moral courage and integrity, that's not the job for them.
Tobias, same question.
I'd want to have a much better understanding of what he learned from that experience and what is going to be different. But if I'm Secretary of State, I'm going to have that conversation and set a really clear expectation about how we will operate going forward. So I don't think it's possible to answer that question definitively today, but I'm not happy with how that played out.
It sounds like we'll have a new elections director if you're elected. You've just essentially said that Molly Woon, who was formerly the chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon, should not have that position.
I will look at the entire lineup with a fresh look and figure out who I think is the best fit for the kind of vision that I have for that office. And I'm not going to make any commitments on who's in what role at this point. I haven't been elected.
What is the Secretary of State not doing that she should be doing? One thing.
That's a good question. I think that the current Secretary of State is doing things, certainly communicating, but the Secretary of State is there temporarily. It's an appointment, one position. I don't know if she came with I noticed she was there just to fill in. When I'm Secretary of State, I go in with a vision of how the agency and the departments and everybody in there, what are the expectations? I refer back to sensing sessions, talking to everyone, so they have a clear understanding what I expect from them and what they should expect from me as well. So what she's doing right now, I think that she's keeping the process flowing along.
Tobias?
I think one aspect of the job that is sometimes overlooked is the land board. And while I've been treasurer, we've had 4 secretaries of state, and I have not yet seen.
Just to be clear, the land board manages state lands,
Yes,
and the people who sit on the land board are the Secretary of State, the state treasurer,
and the governor.
and the governor.
That's right. So 4 secretaries of state while I've been treasurer, and obviously different circumstances for each. But I think there is a missed opportunity so far for the Secretary of State's office to take a really active and contributing role in the land board. There are important discussions to be had there, not just in the overall sort of maintenance and management, but there needs to be some comprehensive updates and reviews of the way we look at public assets when it comes to infrastructure, the way we are thinking about easements and cables and what is permitted on range lands. Virtually all the structures that exist there were built for another time that did not contribute or did not contemplate where we are now. That's a place the Secretary of State can
But
contribute.
isn't that construct just seems so outdated? Why the chief elections officer is serving on the land board?
Well, it's the 3 constitutional offices.
No, I
the
know,
first board.
but I mean, it just in terms of expertise, in terms of
Okay,
kind of skill set.
Well, you asked the question of what I think is
No, I'm just
missing.
wondering, as you
Yeah.
think about, if you had your magic wand, would somebody who's in the Secretary of State's office be sitting on the land board? It just seems to me it's
Well, it's a relic. It used to be the Board of Control, which was a lot of other things too. So I think it's an accident of history in some sense. It's also interesting why the Governor, the Secretary of State, and the Treasurer in the Constitution and the Attorney General is not. Those are all interesting. It's also challenging. If I have the magic wand, it would also be nice to have a larger land board so we could talk to each other outside of public meetings and understand the way we're thinking. Can't do that because that would represent that's a quorum.
It's a quorum, yeah.
So that's another challenge. But
well, we're not going to
Does it
support
mean you can't talk about anything?
can't talk about land board business. You can
Talk about
ask what you had for breakfast.
I'm sorry, I'm getting into the weeds here. When you're state treasurer, do you have in the state treasurer staff for the land board, or you depend on the land board staff?
Each member of the land board has a land board assistant, a designated person who is on their staff. So there's a person who works at Treasury who handles land board preparation and so on, and talks to the other land board
Does that
assistants.
person do anything else?
Yes, in our case, she's also our legislative director.
So
It's different in different offices have different people.
for the land board itself, as the Secretary of State, I am committed to, one, making sure that our public lands, waterways, and forests are not for sale. That's why I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club exclusively. That's why 350 Salem, Oregon has endorsed me. That's why former Congressman Peter DeFazio has endorsed me, because they know my position on conservation, and they know that under my watch, there will never be a sale of our public lands, waterways, or our forests.
Is there something specific you would point to that your opponent has done on the land board in terms of selling land or other policies that you disagree with?
I'm only speaking about myself as my movement. This is where I am. Anybody else, that's a question that has to be asked of others.
Well, you're implying that he did something that you disagree with.
No, I'm committed, because even as EWEB commissioner, Nestle tried to purchase water rights on the McKenzie River, which is the sole drinking water source for Eugene. And when they came, Nestle, I stood up and I asked Nestle.
You were on the EWEB board?
I was on the EWEB board. And I said, let me see if I get this right. You want us to give you permission to sell us back what's naturally ours. That's not going to work. So I led the charge and we shut that down.
Yeah.
There was also someone trying to build a resort on McKenzie. I stopped that too, because our natural resource has to be reserved for generations yet to come. That's the reason why I'm committed to that.
Okay. We're out of time.
Can I just one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have, what environmental organization endorsements do you have?
There have not been others that have been involved in the race at this point.
Okay.
But I can certainly point to individuals and specific accomplishments. But there haven't been a lot of institutional endorsements in that realm.
I see.
We're out of time. We have one question that is meant to personalize you let our readers understand you better. If there were going to be a movie made about your life,
Oh no.
who would play you? Which actor?
Oh, I got it.
Dave, we'll start with you. Dave, we'll start with you first.
Actors.
If you don't pick one, we're going. I'd encourage you to come up with an answer.
Oh, gosh.
All
There
John
right.
you go.
Oh, that's good.
There you go.
Senator Manning.
Lou Gossett Jr.
Great, all right. Good
Ooh,
job.
Lou Gossett Jr.?
Good.
Same
Officer in the
haircut.
gentleman. Officer in the gentleman.
That's right. Great movie.
Treasurer Read.
So, since I've been accused of being Mr. Rogers, and since Tom Hanks did such a good job with that, I'll pick Tom Hanks. He's very versatile,
All right, good. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.